Hello, and welcome to this video on Annual Administrative Assessment at George Mason. In this video, we'll talk about reporting on the results of administrative assessment. I'll do a quick review of the overall administrative assessment process. Then I'll look at the components of the results reporting stage in detail. I'll provide an in-depth explanation and examples for each component of the results reporting stage. If you have detailed questions about assessment planning, that is the development of goals, objectives, and assessment measures, there is a separate video about the planning stage. Also, this is not a video on how to use the Nuventive platform, but we do have videos and guides about using Nuventive on the OIEP webpage. As a quick reminder, let's review what administrative assessment is. Administrative assessment is an annual, systematic process of planning objectives for improvement and gathering, analyzing, and using data to assess progress toward those objectives. Assessment is a cyclical process. At the beginning of the year, your unit plans objectives, measures, and targets that will help it better achieve its goals and mission. During the year, you will implement the objectives, carrying out the activities or improvements intended to help you achieve your objectives. You may also want to collect data along the way. At the end of the year, your unit analyzes the results and reports its findings. You'll assess the progress made toward your objectives and use the results to identify what's working and what's not, looking at your strengths and successes as well as opportunities for further improvement. With that information, you begin planning for the next year. The assessment report includes the following components: the mission, goals, objectives, assessment measures, and achievement targets are part of the planning stage. Typically, those are planned out early in the fall term. We covered those components in the other video on assessment planning. The conclusion, results discussion and analysis, recent activities and improvements, and future improvements are part of the results reporting stage. You'll add that information in the late spring or early summer. These are the components we focus on in this video. The deadline for the complete report is June 30th. We do annual assessment because it provides a framework for systematically gathering information about your unit and using it to plan and make improvements. Information from the assessment process helps a unit to identify areas for improvement as well as strengths and successes. That information then informs planning, which hopefully results in improved outcomes, allowing your unit to better contribute to the university's mission and strategic direction. The focus is on continuous improvement and database decision making, and you'll see the reporting stage is where we really dig into using the data and planning improvements. It's also worth mentioning that SAC-COC requires that an institution's administrative units regularly engage in assessment activities that improve their administrative effectiveness. Now let's take a look at the different components of the results stage of the assessment report. First, we'll look at the results, discussion, and analysis section. This section includes a results summary statement in which you briefly state the results of the assessment. This is followed by analysis of findings and any discussion of the data that you find meaningful and relevant to the objective. So you see this section is very much focused on the data. The results statement should be brief and to the point. It should also align with the assessment measure and the achievement target you set. We'll look at some examples of that in a moment. When it comes to analysis and discussion, there are a number of points you can look at. You might want to look at trends over time. How are you doing compared to last year and the year before? You could compare results by subgroups. You could look at certain groups of students, faculty, or alumni. Or you might want to dig into specific data points. For example, if your instrument is a survey, you could dig into specific survey items in the analysis to help you better understand what's going on. You can also look at what factors may be impacting or associated with results. Finally, if there are any issues with the data collection or assessment measure you used that may have affected the results, you could discuss those here. Here's an example of the results, discussion, and analysis section for an objective. If you remember the video on assessment planning, one of our example objectives was this one on increasing retention rates for students in a fictional undergraduate pathway program. In this measure, we've stated that we're going to measure fall to spring retention rates, looking at how many students have continued or matriculated versus how many have dropped out. We're going to calculate it as a percent, and we've set an achievement target of 85%. So our results need to state the fall to spring retention rate for that year, and they should be expressed as a percent. And we do. We state the retention rate for last fall's cohort was 80%. We also provide a little more context regarding our progress toward the achievement target. We then did some further analysis to look at the students who weren't retained and find some interesting information that could be helpful for future planning. You can pause the video now if you'd like some time to read the example. The previous example showed good alignment between the achievement target and results, but that's not always the case. Here are examples of result statements that do not align with the achievement target. Take a look and see if you can identify what is wrong with the result statement in each example. You can pause the video now if you'd like a little time. Did you notice the problems? In the first example, the achievement target was expressed as a percent, but the results were given as a number. It would be better to express the result as a percent to match the achievement target. In the second example, the result statement is incomplete because it doesn't give the GPA of the undergraduate student body. And in the last example, the result statement gives a total, but we don't know how much donations increased by. So all three of these result statements are problematic. Here are some improved result statements that better align with the achievement targets. Moving on. The next section we'll talk about is the conclusion. The conclusion field asks you to select whether the objective was met, partially met, or not met. If you have a clear, specific achievement target and your result statement aligns with your achievement target, then selecting the conclusion should be pretty straightforward. Met means you've achieved your objective. Partially met means you're making progress, but you're not quite there yet. And not met means you haven't made any progress or you don't have any data to report. It's normal and perfectly acceptable to have objectives that are partially met or not met. I'll repeat that. It's normal and perfectly acceptable to have objectives that are partially met or not met. We know that some objectives may take multiple years to achieve, and for those objectives, it is likely that your response will be partially met until the final year. It is also quite common that we encounter unexpected complications during the year, which may delay or sideline an objective. If that's the case, you should explain what happened in the recent activities and improvements section and your plans for next year in the future improvements section. Here are cases where we might select different conclusion options. We'll use the same example objective we've been looking at, the one where we want to increase student retention rates. Remember, we've set an achievement target of 85%. In the first example result statement, we're making progress. We've raised the retention rate to 80%, but we're not there yet. So we select partially met. In the second example result statement, we've achieved a retention rate of 86%. That exceeds the target we set of 85%, so we've achieved our objective. We'd conclude that we've met our target. In the final example result statement, our retention rate is below where we started. Clearly, we haven't made any progress. Here we would select not met. Let's look now at recent activities and improvements. Under recent activities and improvements, you describe the action items you've implemented or any improvements you've made over the last year to work toward your objective. This is where you can describe the various tasks, projects, or initiatives you've been working on. You'll also want to discuss whether the activities or improvements had the desired impact and what worked well and what needs to be further improved. Here's an example recent activities and improvements section for the same objective we've been talking about, increase retention rates. You can pause the video now if you'd like time to read the example. In the final section, Future Improvements, you'll describe your plans for next year. Explain whether or not you plan to continue with the objective and assessment measure next year. If so, what action items or improvements do you have planned for next year? If you do not plan to continue with the objective next year and instead prefer to move in a different direction, explain why and then what your new plans are. The Future Improvement section is where you start to close the loop on the assessment cycle. You're using what you learned from the Results, Discussion, and Analysis section and the Recent Activities and Improvements section to begin planning for next year. Here's an example Future Improvements entry, continuing with the same example objective. You can pause the video now if you'd like time to read the example. That covers the assessment reporting portion of Annual Administrative Assessment. Once you've completed the report, you can begin thinking about objectives for next year. Remember, the data you collect not only helps you identify areas for improvement, but it also helps you identify your strengths and demonstrate progress and success. So as you start to plan priorities and improvements for next year, be sure to also take some time to talk about your strengths and celebrate your successes with your colleagues. This concludes our video on assessment results reporting. For more information and resources on administrative assessment, please see our OIEP webpage. There you'll find templates for drafting your assessment report. We highly recommend you draft in Excel or Word first before entering information in Nuventiv. That way, if you have any problems with Nuventiv, you won't lose your work. There are also written assessment guidelines that include detailed explanations and examples of the various assessment report components, similar to what's found in this video. Many of the examples used in this video are taken from those written guidelines. And you'll find more videos on both assessment and on using Nuventiv on our webpage. Finally, you can always reach out to us at oiep@gmu.edu with any questions. Thank you.